The midterm elections are just 63 days away. Republicans are expected to maintain power in the House of Representatives. All eyes are on a few hotly contested Senate races where the GOP hopes to wrest control from the Democrats. Several compelling gubernatorial races also hang in the balance. The outcome will have wide-ranging implications for President Obama's final 2 years in office. Joining me now to analyze the political moment and the upcoming midterms, Mark Halperin and John Heilemann. They are managing editors of Bloomberg Politics. I am pleased to have him at this table for the umpteenth time. Thank you for coming.
Happy fall.
Happy fall to you.
Doesn't feel like fall.
I'm excited about fall. You know?
Doesn't feel like
Summer
fall
was great. I love vacation, but you know,
let's go.
Great to be back. And big issues we have on this show. You know, foreign policy and now politics, which includes foreign policy these days. Midterm elections. Just give me an overview.
I think you can look at this in a lot of ways. I'd say one thing key for each party. For the Democrats, can they do enough mechanically targeted messages from the president, the vice president, the Clintons, and others to remake the electorate in these targeted Senate states and some of the governor's races where voters who don't normally vote in midterms, younger voters, African Americans, Hispanics, Asians, single women, turn out to vote in a midterm? That's hard to do. On the Republican side, they need a message. Republican strategists will tell you they don't think they can live up to the possibilities of running races in the 6th year of the president of the other party unless they stand for something that appeals to middle class and working class voters. Social issues, the leg of the Reagan stool, social issues largely not in their favor in most cases. Foreign policy, there's a lot going on in the world, but you don't see a lot of Republican strategists saying we're going to win this on foreign policy. What can they do on economics? And right now, they're against Obamacare. They're against a raise in the minimum wage. They have to figure out a way to be a party of ideas.
See,
and right now, they're not.
You've completely confused me because I thought that the Republicans were clearly going to win the House, what most people think they are, and have a real chance of majority control. And it was the Democrats who were on the defensive. You come here saying, no, the Republicans don't know what they stand for.
If the game is majority control of the Senate, and it really is, they're going to pick up maybe 6 House seats, maybe 12, but that range is pretty set. If the game is the Senate, there are 3 they're almost certainly going to win. They need 3 more. Go race by race today, and the next 3 are not obvious, and that is the game.
And those 3 are, go ahead.
Well, here's the I think to your point, Charlie, 6 months ago, there's no doubt that people thought that Republicans were in a perfect position to reclaim control of the Senate. Mark is right. That's what the real story is. The story has really changed in these 6 months, and what has happened is we do not have a midterm election that looks like the previous 2. In 2010, we had a big wave election, very much unified, very big Republican year. In 2006, we had a big wave election, very big Democratic year. That's not what the data shows about this election. What this data shows now is 6 months ago, Republicans thought this would be a big wave year built entirely around opposition to Obamacare. And what has happened over the course of the last 6 months, as the law has become more accepted, as the problems with the website were ironed out, as the enrollment numbers met their targets and exceeded them, and as Democrats found a way to talk about the popular parts of the law, that issue has not totally dissipated. There are still many on the right, and since Mark is also right about it being a turnout game, there are a lot of Republicans who are still driven by anti-Obamacare sentiment, and they will come out to vote against that one issue. But in the middle of the electorate, the heat has come out of that issue, and now it is very much a state-by-state thing. You're looking at if not a wave election, you have a huge amount of unpopularity among both parties, Democrats and Republicans, incredibly unpopular. Republicans more unpopular as a party than the Democratic Party, which has helped Democrats. The economy is doing a little better. As I said, Obamacare has receded as an issue. There's no one galvanizing thing. Republicans, as Mark suggested, have failed to find a unifying theme, and Democrats have then been able to engage in kind of trench warfare, state by state, against a lot of Republican spending in a lot of cases, and are still, even these very, very vulnerable Democrats, still very much in the race in those races. And so you're looking at one of these nights where easily Republicans could end up with 53 seats on election night, and they could also end up a couple seats short.
Money will play a big role or not?
Well, money always plays a big role in statewide races, and so in gubernatorial races and Senate races, it plays a bigger role than it does in presidential elections or in House races. But it is interesting, as I suggested a second ago, how much money has already been spent and how in the key 6 or 7 Senate races that are up for grabs, how little has moved over the course. Millions of dollars has been spent in those races in Arkansas, in North Carolina, in Colorado, other places. And those races have been static for 6 months, and they're all within the margin of error, and nothing has moved. The numbers, the money has not been, there's not been enough disparity of money, and there's not been enough of one issue that's been able to move things that suddenly you've seen anything appreciable moving in all these hotly contested seats.
That's some of the point you made, which is that sort of in this, the 6th year of the Obama 2 terms, that anti-Obama is not a decisive factor, that somehow that game has been played out? Or
it's
not?
a big factor. But look, to win the majority of the Senate, and that's what we're talking about here is the Senate races, right? You have to Republicans have to beat some number of Democratic incumbents. We don't know the exact number, but some number. Hard to beat incumbents who aren't scandal-ridden and are focused. All these incumbents are very focused and have been on keeping their job. So yes, a lot of Republicans will turn out to be a check on the president. But to beat a well-known, in most cases pretty well-liked incumbent Democratic senator, and well-funded, you need a strong challenger. Some of these Republicans got all the challengers they hope to get. The establishment did. But none of those candidates have really proven themselves as giant killers, incumbent beaters. There's no doubt that the animating principle will be on Election Day for many, many voters, be a check on the president. But if the Democrats can change the electorate, as I said, and if these incumbents can convince voters that they deserve another chance, another term, they may not get to majority. I keep saying to people who say it's going to be a huge Republican year, of course they'll take the majority because of the anti-Obama sentiment. Go race by race. Tell me what the next three most likely ones are. You're talking about beating Mary Landrieu in Louisiana, or beating Mark Pryor in Arkansas, or Kay Hagan in North Carolina, or Mark Begich in Alaska. I think the fourth most likely one to fall of the six they need to net is maybe the open seat in Iowa. That's easier in some ways than beating an incumbent. Right. And these incumbents in the red states, you know, a lot of them are legacies. Mark Pryor and Mary Landrieu, they've got Mark Begich. They've all got parents who were involved in politics, and they're well-known brands. And in those states, in most states, that matters.
Is the game plan that Jim Messina put together in 2012 the game plan that the Democratic Party needs in 2014?
Well, there's no doubt.
Single issue.
Well,
identify the voters and serve their
identify the voters and get them out. And look, you can run. There's no way you can run a midterm election the way you run a presidential election, especially for an incumbent president. In 2012, Jim Messina had the ability to not be challenged in a Democratic primary, and he had 4 years basically to husband resources, pick the counties in the 7 or 8 states that they really cared about, and focus on those individual voters, not just demographics, but actually the voters in question, and go and talk to them over and over again for 4 years, and then drive them to the polls on Election Day. You can't do that in quite the same way in a congressional election. But the notion of expanding the electorate, and again, something Mark just mentioned a couple times, the notion that what Messina and Plouffe and those guys understood, which was that they needed not only for, it's always a different electorate in a presidential year than in a non-presidential year, but they needed for their voters, African-American voters, single women, college-educated women, Hispanics, young voters, all those people, they needed them all to come out in really big numbers to offset all of the political headwinds that Barack Obama was facing. Democrats in this race need to do that on a state-by-state basis. And so you see targeted efforts that are being undertaken in all of these contested Senate races to try to, in a place like Louisiana, try to get the African-American vote up. In Colorado, try to get the Hispanic vote up. That has become part of the science of micro-targeting. Right. And now it is no longer just at the presidential level. There is no doubt the Democratic Party is trying to the extent it's possible in a midterm year, take away the lessons of 12 and apply them now in 14.
Another page they're taking, which they must take, and they can take because Republicans, as I said at the top, have no real message, which is they can say, we don't have that many new good ideas, but look, we're for a raise in the minimum wage, we're for equal pay for women, we're for keeping Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security and health care going, we're for immigration reform. Not that big an issue in most of these targeted races. Right. But these economic issues that the middle class cares about, they can basically say, as Joe Biden likes to say, don't judge us in comparison to the almighty, judge us in comparison to the alternative. And so they can say, look, we're for raising a minimum wage. That tests at about 70%. Right. We're for equal pay for women. That tests real well, too, with polls. We're for preserving Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security. That tests really well. Republicans don't have the courage right now or the ideas to counter those things. And so the Democrats, even though the economy for a lot of Americans doesn't feel better, they've got, as President Obama had in 2012, the ability to say, forget everything else out there. Just look at, here's what we're for on the economy and your security, economic security. Here's what they're for. That is a page you saw on the President and the Vice President on Labor Day. That was a core of their speech. Sounded very much like what the President talked about in 2012.
And there's a reason why Republicans are as unpopular as they are. At the congressional level, they're historically unpopular. The Congress itself is historically unpopular. Congressional Republicans historically unpopular. They have become associated in the minds of a lot of voters, and again, not Republican-based voters who love them, but voters in the middle of the electorate who might be undecided, might be persuadable. They have become associated with nothing but nihilism, That is what, for a lot of voters, what they've seen. They saw that in the shutdown last fall, and it hurt Republican candidates in the off-year elections in 2013. And then we saw it again this summer when when the border crisis flared. You had Republicans calling for action, and then in Congress not being able to do what they said they wanted to do, not being able to take action in that area, and then standing up and saying they wanted President Obama to take unilateral action, even though they were suing him at that time for taking too many unilateral actions. And for a lot of voters who don't watch politics up close in a really granular way, all they see is Republicans saying 99999, and not Herman Cain's 9, but the German version. No to everything. And that is not the way to galvanize. That's not the way to galvanize a wave election. You can't do it if you have no affirmative message whatsoever.